Oh, there's Veronica.
Yeah.
All right, we're all set.
Good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon's presentation. I'm Carol Latham, the Community Outreach Coordinator for the MUZEO Museum and Cultural Center in Anaheim. And it is our wish that you, your family, and your circle of concern are all well. The MUZEO is a cultural hub for the community, and its mission is to engage the community in exploring and celebrating the diverse heritage, culture, and arts. And we do this through a myriad of different presentations like this, exhibits, and programs. And we appreciate you taking the time this afternoon when you could be doing so many other things to join us. Be sure if you have any questions to add them in the chat, and we will do our very best during the presentation to get them answered. This program is being recorded and will be available online later. The American Opal Society is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, educational in nature, whose primary purpose is to promote the interest and knowledge of this beautiful, precious gem. They pursue the study and sharing of information about opals. This is the second in a series of 3 presentations, and the last one will be next Sunday, October the 11th. The presenter is Pete Goetz. He has a BA degree 1972 from San Diego State University, and he majored in geography with a minor in geology. He's been a member of the Opal Society for 20 years and has president for 15. His current title is President Emeritus. Pete is also a retired physical science teacher. Joining him is Russ Mattson, who served on the board of the American Opal Society as treasurer for 15 years. So thank you both, Pete and Russ, for joining us and sharing your knowledge about this wonderful gem, opals. And we'll start with you, Pete.
All righty, hello guys. I'm glad some of you came back. Some of you must be watching that football game, so don't ask me scores because I'm not an athletic person. It could be 0 to 12 for all I know. Anyway, thanks for being here. And this hour and 10 minutes or so, I'm going to try to whiz through a lot of territory. We're going to talk about the opals of Americas. But before I do that, there was a parting question last week regarding Ethiopian. So I'm going to spend a few minutes here talking about Ethiopian opal. Now, here we go, technology. I push the green thing, right? Then I do what? This. And I think it's going to be the end. I want to go to the beginning. Okay. And I need to push this little button and that little button. Okay, guys, are you ready to be dazzled? Okay, last week we covered some of the physical parts of opal. We had discussed what it was, its chemical formula, and a similarity to common quartz sand. We talked a little bit about the structure. The opal was made up of silica spheres in a given lattice. You'll hear that term occasionally. I didn't use that last week, but I thought I'd throw it in this week just to add to your vocabulary. And we also learned that the color from opals comes from a variety of events once light enters a sample of opal. And then, of course, we learned a little bit about the opals from the Great Artesian Basin and how important the Artesian Basin is to the opal industry. Okay, today we're going to talk about, or we're going to start the day with a little discussion on Ethiopian opal. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with where Ethiopia is, it's on the eastern side of the continent up against the Red Sea. Now, as you can see here. And the area that we're going to be talking about first, there's a couple areas here. The first location for opal was his Men's Gish, I'm hoping that's correct, district. This was kind of what it looks like. So it was kind of tough to get to. So about 1994 or so, Ethiopian opal started showing up in the gem trade, at shows and dealers, and you started seeing some jewelry made of this. Now the Mengistu district is in the Shuwa, I guess that's pronounced, province in Ethiopia, which is up in the north and kind of east, and I'll show you that in a minute. Most of the opal in this area had a brown or dark brown, dark red, really dark colored bases. And the color was, now I'm going to use a term here, and Russ might jump in and smack me, but I'm going to do it anyway. There's an opal, a Brazilian opal. Or no, not Brazilian, but contralutes. When you look at contralutes opal, the color's not on the surface. It's kind of inside. I've got a couple of samples of this old or newer, or it's old now. And it looks to me that the color is not on the surface. It looks like it's deep inside that little geode I have. So it has something of that effect, although I'm not so sure that's accurate at the point. And as you can see, it's a bit difficult to get. And the reason this is why when you first saw Ethiopian opal, it had a lot of fractures. It was hard to find a good solid piece because they couldn't get equipment back there. So everything was done by sledgehammer. Somebody found a piece of opal or a piece of rough, and in order to get the opal out, they would smack it with a hammer. Well, that's not really good for the opal. And now Veronica's got a visitor there. I hope she understands all that stuff there. She's got her bib on, ready for chow, I guess. Anyway, all right. So the first rough that came out of this area looks like this. As I mentioned, it's really dark. Now, someone said that you could see my little cursor here, so I'm going to make everybody dizzy right now. Okay, I have a piece that looks like this, and if you look at that, it kind of looks deep to me. All right, and then if you have the time and the patience and you can find a piece that's stable enough, you can cut stuff that looks like this, and you can wind up having jewelry that looks like that. Okay, this is that real dark base stuff like this. This might come out of something that looks like that. Okay. Alrighty. Now, the right down the Rift Valley, this area right in here, there's a Y-shaped piece of real estate, and that's a Rift Valley, and these mountains run along here like this. Okay. Anyway, so down the road a piece, they found a new spot called Whelan. I'm going to guess that's how that's pronounced. And again, we have this really nifty territory they have to transgress. Now, this was about, I don't know what, 2000, I'm going to say about 2008. This area shows up. And the reason this particular mine is important to Ethiopia is that the opals in this area are a whole lot more stable than the opals found in the initial findings. Now, where this opal is, as you can see right in here, there's an eximbrite layer, and these opals are found within that volcanic material. Yeah, it's kind of hard to explain, but somewhere in there, there's a clay layer. Now, clay is impervious. So when you have this volcanic rhyolites in here, you have a silica source, and then when the moisture comes along, it percolates through the that volcanic ash. That it dissolves the silica, and since it can't penetrate that clay layer, it just kind of sits there, and over a period of time, you have the development of opal. Which brings up a point. Now, this one, again, is for my buddy Russ. All right, you hear this term volcanic opal. No such thing, okay? What it is you find opal in association with either sedimentary rocks or with volcanic rocks. And I think I got ahead of myself on that one, Russ. Okay. Now, this shows a little bit of what this new rough looks like. It's very similar in appearance, except now they got some lighter colored material out of this line, out of this vein. And again, with time and patience, this is what that'll produce. Now, to even add to our, hey, we got a new thing. Now, a couple of miles down that same river gorge, I'm gonna not try to pronounce these, but they found three areas three mining areas with these names, okay? Now, what's good about this is it, whoop, I got ahead of myself. Oh, okay. We talked about how in the gimbrites along that ridge, okay, in here, okay, and then that clay layer where it hardens or the silica water can't penetrate and it makes the opal. Now, because of the territory, as you saw, was very steep, they can't get equipment in there. So all that equipment, all that opal is hand dug or dug by hand, however you want to put that. And again, in these new areas, this is what the rough might look like. And this is the opal that it'll produce. Now, it's very similar to the Willow, and it's very similar to the men's gish. And it's all in that same area. It's all in that same formation, so to speak. Okay. Whoop, I got to quit saying okay. I had a teacher friend of mine call me last week, and he said, you know, the most important word you must be in your vocabulary is okay. And so, okay, I'm not going to say okay anymore. Okay? All right, next, how's that? All right. Next slide. This is an example of the rough, again, that comes from this area. We have, obviously, the rough. Now, this is good quality rough. This is not something you just casually kick a rock and find, okay? And again, this is what you can produce from that new find. All right, any questions on this part so far? Any questions on the Ethiopian? Okay, basically what we have is we have three areas, an old, a not so old, and a newer area. They all get the opal from pretty much the same strata. It's all formed pretty much the same way, and it's all mostly hand dug. Okay, up there it is again. All right, let's talk about North and South America. And I like old things, so I found this old map. I don't even know how accurate it is, but because this right here, I'm not sure what that is. Or actually this, remember, if you own property in Arizona, at some point in life, it'll be beachfront, because this part of California is going this way at about 2.5 centimeters a year, for those of you who really care. I just thought I'd throw that in. Okay. Oh, here, okay, here, Russ, here's your slide. All right, the difference between Australian and American opal is American opal is associated with volcanic formations. Just about all of the opal that you find in the Americas is going to be somewhere near volcanic activity, as opposed to Australia. Most of it is in sedimentary rocks. As you can see here, we have what's called the iron band, and then below that is your opal layer. And this is probably about 30 meters or so. Okay. All right, British Columbia. Now, in the lower part of British Columbia, down in this area here, we have a valley, and again, now I'm gonna Okanagan. Anyway, you can see it. That valley is at the end of that purple stripe, okay? Down near Vernon, British Columbia. Now, this is what it's basically a surface mine, in which you have a bunch of tertiary rocks that have been surfaced or cleared, and you just walk through there and look for nodules. When you pick up I'll come back to those nodules. Now, this is Canada's first commercial line, and it's based, again, it's found in seams and vugs in volcanic tuff. Now, tuff, that's T-U-F-F, it's kind of like between a rhyolite and straw that somebody dumped a bunch of super glue in. All right, this is what the rough looks like. These the nodules aren't necessarily round. They can be angular, or they can be part of a seam. And this is what you can get out of this. So even though they're not quite like Australian or even some of the really pretty stuff down in other parts of the Americas, it's still an attractive stone. Now, I understand there's some legal issues going on up there right now, so I don't know if it's open. It is a fee dig, but I don't know if they're letting people in there at the moment. Louisiana, or Louisiana, depending on where you're from. There's a place called Leesville, which, as you can see right there, it's a little bit west of New Orleans. And there we find this. Now, basically, this is a sandstone, actually. And where the opal is the matrix in this case. What you have is a bunch of sandstone, and it's glued together with a clear cement of opal. And when you see the color, that's where it's emanating from, not the sandstone, but the opal that's holding it together. Now, this formation was originally identified there in southern Louisiana. However, that same rock has showed up in formations from almost Houston, Texas, almost over to the eastern end of Mississippi along the Gulf Coast. There's a wide band in there that you can find this nifty looking stuff. All right, we're going to head north a little bit here. Well, okay, you can't get this stuff. It's on private property. I think some utility company owns this particular property, and there was an insurance issue, so they don't let you dig on there unless you're really quick. You know what I mean? Really quick. Okay, now we're going to head a little bit north. We're going to go up to Wyoming to a place called Cedar Rim. Okay. Again, this is a surface dig, and it's about 100 miles west of Casper, if you're familiar with Oklahoma. And right along in here, there's a highway 135, and it's somewhere in between there. Okay, again, it's a surface dig. It's also a fee dig, and this one is up and operating. Now, what's interesting about Wyoming is there's also a big jade deposit in Wyoming. So sometimes you have to be careful, you know, whether you're looking at jade or opal. In this particular case, the jade doesn't play an issue, but there is, if I read it correctly, not too far from here, there is a jade outcropping. And of course, this is what the rough looks like. Okay, heading far to the west. Well, not yet. We got to take a break here. All right, when you polish this stuff up, you get something that looks like there's a lot of dendritic material. And then these can polish up pretty well, but the color it's not solid like you'd normally think of an opal. Almost like there's a matrix rock in there, but it's not really matrix. It's a non-opal within the opal. Anyway, it gives it some character. If you like character, these are good stones to mess with. Now we're going to go west. All right, Moscow Opal Mining Center. Now, Moscow Opal Mines, that's not one mine. That's a group of mines. All right. what happened here? Okay, it's a group of mines down in this area here on the border of Idaho and Washington. It's, oh, there it is, my blinker. It's too late now, blinker. Oh boy. Okay. There's two areas. There's Whelan and Moscow, Idaho. They're probably, I would say, about 20, maybe 30 miles apart. And there's a whole bunch of mines in between those two places. There must be 20, 25 mines of opal. That whole conglomerate is called the Moscow Opal Mines. Now, this was the first commercial mining area in the United States. Okay, and it was basically found like a lot of opal mines. A miner was out, not a miner, but a farmer was out drilling a well. He gets down to about 20 feet, and all of a sudden he's got a different feel, pulls it up, and it's opal dirt. Well, it wasn't quite that simple, but that's what happened. Okay, now, as I mentioned, it's on both sides of the border between the cities of Pullman, Washington, and Moscow, Idaho. And again, we have our volcanics here. The underlying rock here is a rhyolite, kind of edging into being an obsidian. But there's a lot of cavities in this rock left by the gases that were extruded when this volcanic or tectonic events occurred, leaving again the voids in which the opal can settle into. Going back to reminding that there is no such thing as volcanic opal. There's only opal found in volcanoes. Well, volcanic stones. Okay. Again, a lot of this is a surface dig. Again, it's a fee dig. This particular mine is called the Spencer Mine. Spencer Mine's kind of has a bit of notoriety because a couple of really nice opals have come from this area. And I think there's one in the Smithsonian. Is that right, Russ? Shake your head. Russ is looking at me. Thank you. Yes. Russ says yes. Okay. It's all right, Veronica. I see you there, but I haven't figured out a question to ask you yet. But I'll think of something. Anyway, so again, fee dig, surface, and you can dig into the mountain, but there's two different fees. There's a fee level. If you pay like $1, you get to do one thing. If you pay $100, you get to do something else. Of course, that's not the real prices, but the object is the difference. Okay, now about 10% of the material you find in this mine is solid enough or thick enough to cut gems from, or cut opal from. The remainder are used in doublets and triplets. They make pretty attractive doublets and triplets. And then they have in this area an opal called a geyser opal. Now, geyser opals they're kind of like pearls. There's a cavity, right? You got a cavity. There's nothing in that cavity but air. Along comes a geyser. It goes through all that volcanic ash. It picks up some silica in the water. It sprays the volcanic rock, but they don't fill up. Okay, a couple of hundred years goes by. We have another geyser with another layer of silica with a slightly different mix of local rocks. Anyway, this goes on over and over and over, and you get this onion-looking thing, and it gives you some pretty interesting opal patterns. This occurs here, and there's a place in California that we'll talk about that does the same thing. There are some other places in Washington that opal is noted, but we're not going to, with the time constraint, we're not going to go into that. But in Douglas County, Grant County, and whatever, I can't read that, but whatever that county is. All right. Oregon. Monroe County, rather. Moscow, I'm okay. Got Moscow on the brain here. Okay, in Oregon, one of the more noted places for for collecting opal is called Opal Butte. The other one is Juniper, or Juniper, however you want to say that, Ridge. And we're going to talk a little bit about both of those areas. Okay. Juniper Ridge is an open pit. Now, it doesn't look too pitty here, but you can see they're starting to, here where they're digging into a wall, and then back over here, the wall that wall gets a little higher, and it gets a little more aggressive in its relief. This is what you're looking for. Again, we're dealing with our rhyolite, which is our volcanic silica, and the matrix is this rhyolite, and in that you'll find the opal. Now, this particular mine has got some notoriety for the quality of its color, and here we can see some clear and some yellow down in here, and some orange and red. And some of this opal, it has a lot of dendritic markings in it, and they can look pretty. Some of them look like this almost looks like a forest that somebody burned down. There's trees are starting to come back or something. You can make all kinds of stories up about the dendritic patterns, but they're interesting. And if you cut them well, you know, they'll make nice jewelry. Okay, this is the what I was talking about earlier about their colors, the red and the orange. I mean the yellow, the orange, and the red. Now this picture's not too good because, well, there's a lot of reasons for that. And if you want to make some pretties, this is kind of the stuff you can make out of the Opal Butte Opal. All right, Opal Butte, we just left. Now we're going to go down here and mess with, did I repeat myself? Hang on a minute, guys. The magnificent Goetz, think he just goofed up. Okay. This, hang on, don't go away. Okay, I think I got the names mixed up. Okay, there's a mining claim in the southern end on the southern rim or edge of Oregon, down in this area. Wait a minute, let me get you back into the program here. Along the Columbia River. And the problem with these is that they're embedded in a rhyolite layer that's covered by the Columbia River basalts. It's a little bit tough to get to, but if you got, again, time and patience, you'll get agate or you'll find some opal. Again, 10% of this is you can get quality grade opal. Of that, about 1% you'll find where you can get really quality opal with color play. The rest of the opals will contain agate, quartz, or just common opal. And again, if you're the artist, this is what you can do with some of that opal from Opal Butte. Also in the state of Oregon, there's two others. They have a blue opal they're kind of famous for. It's over on the right hand or the eastern edge of the state near this OH-WAH-hee dam, and it's on some kind of, or somewhere near a sacred Indian springs. And again, if you take this and you have the time and you want to cut it up, this is the type of material you can get out of here. The last thing about opal in Oregon is they do have a variety of contralutes. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with that, basically, if you have a regular plain old everyday opal and you look at it, the color looks like it's on the surface. Contralutes, if you illuminate it from the back, the color pattern seems to be suspended inside the stone. It's kind of nice if you have the right light. All right, California. The area we're going to talk about here is over near Bishop along the Nevada, California border. In Opal Canyon is one of the places that we're going to talk about. Now, there's a whole bunch of places in California that you can dig for a variety of gem minerals. There's about 4 or 5 opal digs, and I think I might let Russ get involved in this conversation. No, I didn't fix this, but anyway, in Opal, one of the things in Opal Canyon, I mentioned earlier about those geyser opals. We're going to find those here as well. Now, this is a picture of, get this black thing out of my way. There we go. Okay, this is a picture of Opal Canyon. Opal Canyon is located in the El Paso Mountains over in Kern Valley County, which is on the east side, about halfway up the state. And this is the same area up against that Last Chance Canyon wall. Now, at this point, I might say that again, we have our volcanics. Now, we talked about geysers, right? So we got this volcanic flow, then we have a nifty geyser, okay? And then that produces, well, okay. It produces that opal I showed you earlier that had that onion skin type of thing. You want to jump in here and say something on this, Russ, or yes, no?
I think you're good.
All right, onward and downward. We're moving through this faster than I thought, Caroline. Or Caroline, sorry. All right, this is the kind of material you find in Opal Canyon. There is opal, but you have to work at it. It's not like going to Australia or even to some of the mines up north. The opal is embedded in little tiny pockets within the basalt. Every once in a while, you'll find one like this. Now, every time we have a show or we go to an event, if you hear a lot of knocking in our booth, that's Russ over there beating one of these rocks to death so he can get out some of that little opal. This is not an easy opal fix. I mean, if you have to be a real opalholic to do this. Nevada. Again, Nevada's got a lot of areas that you can work with, but we're going to talk basically about Virgin Valley. Now, within the Virgin Valley, there are 3 mines that we're going to take a quick look at, and that'll be the Royal Ridge, the Royal Peacock, the Rainbow Ridge, the Royal Peacock, and the Bonanza Opal mines. Now, as a note, the Virgin Valley is in the middle of a state park. Not state park, but a refuge, a wildlife refuge. Refuge, is that how you say that word, guys? Okay. So this is a closer look at Virgin Valley. Now, you see this gray area right in here, or whatever color that is, taupe? Okay, that's where these mines are. Like the Peacock is down here, and Rainbow is in through here, I think, somewhere. But anyway, this is the area where you find those 3 mines that we talked about. It's in the middle of, this is the Sheldon National Wildlife Refuge. for those of you who would like to get with the birds and the bees. No pun intended there, folks. Okay. All right. Now, again, same situation. Millions of years ago, the Virgin Valley was about 10,000, was several thousand feet lower than it is now. And it was covered with shallow lakes and forests. Well, through time, there was a number of the volcanic eruptions, and this would kind of blow these trees apart, scatter them all over the place. And as the ash fell, it would fall on these trees and in the water. And this cycle went over and over for millions of years. Now, eventually, this layer of ash got to be pretty thick, somewheres in some areas, 1,500 feet. Now, what happens is the water percolates through all this, finds the cavities left by the decaying organic matter, the trees or wildlife, whatever was there at the time and got trapped, kind of like a mold. Okay, now here we have superheated water coming up. Now, I from the reading I've done on this and from talking with people, I don't know if this was geyser. This might be like, remember last week we talked about the artesian water in the artesian basin, how it just kind of comes up. It doesn't squirt up. Well, I think that's what happened here. This really hot water kind of went north, or well, rose, and it melted or dissolved the silica that was in all this ash, and that silica water filled in the voids left by the organic matter. Okay. Now, the Virgin Valley, or at least a lot of the digs in Virgin Valley are they're not underground. They're going to be open. Like this is the the Rainbow Opal Mine, and you can see it's a surface mine. You just go through the tailings or the dumps here, and I don't think this is virgin material. I think this is that they don't let you into the property. They go get it, bring it, and you kind of like bucket mining. Okay, this is what you're looking for. This piece down here is pretty raw, and then you clean it up, it'll look a little bit like that, but you can get some spectacular opal out of the Spencer mine. Now notice that this one is in a jar of, hopefully that's water. If for those of you who might have some opal and someone told you to put it in glycerin, no, don't do that. Put it in water, okay? Now I didn't try to pick out really dazzling pieces because I didn't want you to go up there thinking that's what you were going to find. Because I know that happened to me one time. Someone showed me these really great pieces of stone, and I loaded up my truck. I zipped out to the desert, and all I saw was rocks. I didn't see any pretty stuff. That's because they didn't tell me how to do it. So anyway, you're not going to find this kind of stuff all the time. Okay, the Royal Peacock, pretty much the same way. It's an open pit or surface, depending on how you want to call it. Now, the geology for these three mines is going to be pretty much the same. So, you've got to think back to what I said earlier about the shallow lakes and the forest, 2,000 or 3,000 feet lower than they are now. Again, the Royal Peacock, you go up against these formations, for lack of a better term, and it's a bucket dig. It is a fee dig. And this is what you can find. Now, these are kind of outstanding examples of the stuff you can find at the Royal Peacock. As you can see, a tree limb here, and this to me looked like a 3-wood, but it's probably part of a leg bone or knee, maybe, I don't know. And if you, with patience, this is the kind of jewelry you can produce from Royal Peacock opal. Further south, nope, I lied, to the east, we have Arizona. And down at the bottom of Arizona, we have a place, My trigger finger just isn't what it used to be, guys. Good thing I'm not a hunter, man. I'd be doing a joke. Who's the guy who got shot, Biden? Or the other guy? Forgot his name. Anyway, we're not going to do that. Okay, the Southern Sky Opal Mine have purchased some old opal land down this way, and they're starting to redevelop it. Now, right below, well, this is about 100 miles, I would say, south of Tucson in Santa Cruz County. It's a little tiny county down there. There's an artist colony called Tubec, or Tubec, I'm going to guess that's how it's pronounced. Well, right to the east of that is where these opal mines, the Southern Sky Opal Mine is. And it's a surface mine, like a lot of the mines in this area. And again, it owes its existence to volcanic activity. Again, volcanic activity. Now here, the water source is thermal. Now, if you've ever done any work, if you've ever driven through there, down there along Highway 8, just as you go down 7 Mile grade, off to the north, you're going to see a hydrothermal electric plant. And what they're doing is they're generating electricity because they've drilled down to release some of this thermal water or pressure. Remember now, we got a lot of, we're right along the San Andreas Fault there. So there's a lot of heat and a lot of trapped water and pressure. And so I think what they're alluding to here again is not necessarily geysers, but the thermal activity where the water is being pushed up, kind of like in an artesian situation. Now, in this area, again, is very tectonically active. And every time there's an eruption down that area, the volcanic rock will attach itself to a local mineral of whatever it's near. And local minerals, as you know, like copper, you get greens and blues, like azurite and malachite, that kind of stuff. All right, so as these eruptions occur, they mix with the local rock and they get these banded opal here. Okay, so you get this, each band represents an eruption, or each several bands, however long the duration was. Okay, and you will get some play of color. Now again, this is the exception. You don't go down there looking for this because you might find it, but probably not. What you're going to find is this, and if it's cut up right and polished right, it's got its own sense of beauty. As you can see from here, this is made with rough. They didn't polish it. They just went and shaped the rough. I kind of like this idea. It gives me more earthy feel to it. You know what I mean? This stuff, even though it's pretty, it has that commercial sense to it. And I think that, for me anyway, it kind of takes away from it. But, you know, to each his own, so to speak. How are we doing on time, guys? Okay.
You're fine.
All right, because all right, well, okay, questions. Any questions on what we got here so far?
Yeah, we have a couple.
Okay.
Comment on the difference between Australian, African, and American opals.
Okay. Australian opal, again, is sedimentary. Ethiopian and American opal are usually associated with volcanic activity. American opal is usually unstable. I mean, the really bright, the really good, high quality stuff has a tendency to be unstable. Too much water in the mix, I guess. Although that doesn't mean that there aren't excellent cut Spencer or Rainbow or Peacock stones out there. There are. The colors, or the play of color in Australian opal surface and can be bright, but it seems to be an exception. All of the mining areas in Australia, but in particular Lightning Ridge is where you find the really bright stuff. Now it seems that the Ethiopian, almost everything you look at has got a flare to it. It's hard we have a couple of dealers that come to our show, and it's hard to walk by their booth and find a cheap piece. Well, I don't mean cheap, but a piece that's got matrix on it that I can afford to buy. But the Ethiopian opal at the beginning was very unstable. But the stuff now that's coming from that Wegeltena and those three that I couldn't pronounce, those opals are very, very stable, and they're just bright. I mean, they're just bright. So I would say the big difference is the environment in which they grow, volcanic versus sedimentary. And then the other big difference would be the intensity of the color. Would you agree with that, Russ, or would you add to that?
Sure. Another question was to discuss the different mining methods between Australia and the Americas.
Okay, in Australia, you have a variety of mining methods. You have everything from tunneling, open pit, mining. You have you have people in it with rock in hand. Most of the American mines are not tunnels. They're open pit or surface mines. They're not deep. Now that's not to say that they don't exist, but as a general rule. So the biggest difference between Australia and the U.S. And also you're going to find in South America is that they use a lot more equipment to dig opal in Australia than they do in this country. Here, if you got a bulldozer or a backhoe, you're in business. If you're in Australia, that backhoe would look at you and say, yeah, right, and then kind of run out of gas. But that's kind of basically the difference, I think.
Another question kind of related to your earlier comment, can you define the word stability when you refer to opal as being stable?
Okay, a stable opal is one that doesn't crack or craze. Now, what happens with crazing is you get an opal that's too damp. I have a friend of mine who's in the business who once told me that if I was going to buy an opal, the first thing I should ask is how deep that opal was dug. And I looked at him. This is Tim Thomas, for those of you who know him. And he explained to me that if the opal gets too near the water content is too high. So when you start grinding on that piece of opal, the heat from your grinder makes the water expand and the opal cracks. So it's unstable. It got too much water in it. But basically opals that don't have a tendency to crack or craze is what I define as being a stable opal. It's got color, it's got body, but it doesn't craze.
Another thought would be to remind people never put opals in a safe deposit box because banks dehydrate the atmosphere in those rooms and they're too dry. They will draw the water out of a stable opal and you'll get opal that was perfectly fine. You go back a couple of years later and it's cracked.
Yeah.
So that's that. Another question was presented is, how do you tell where an opal came from if you're looking at, let's say you're at a jewelry store?
Okay, this is a tough question, and we're going to address this next week. But if you've been around opal for a while, there's certain really base characteristics. You can look at an opal, and if it's got a white base to it, you're going to say, well, that probably came from Cooper Pedy or Mintaby. If it's got a dark base, it might be from the far edge of Andamuka or Lightning Ridge. But these are things you as a casual consumer, it would be tough for you to do that. I'm going to try to give you some help next week on how to buy opal at a jewelry store, what to look for, and we'll talk a little bit about the opals from the different areas. But basically, when you to determine what an opal is, if you where it's from, if you've got a solid piece of opal and it's white, it's probably from Cooper Pedy. If you've got a piece of opal that's kind of got, when you look at it, you think blue, and there's a brown rock back to it, it's probably from somewhere in Queensland, that kind of thing. If you see an opal that's extremely bright, and encased in say ironstone, and it's about the size of a marble, it's probably going to be a choroid Yawa nut, that kind of thing. So it takes a little bit of experience, and I'm fair at it, but there's probably a lot of other people out there in our group that are probably better at it than I. But I can get you started. I can give you enough information so that when you go in to buy an opal, you'll be comfortable. We'll get back to that next week if that's okay.
There was one more, which I'll talk about. How do you tell if you've got a piece of host rock with opal in it, which gem do you try to get out? And to me, there's two questions. What color is the stone, and how much color play does it have? So if I have a rock where I've got two opals on it, and I'm going to have to probably damage one of them, I'll pick which one is more clear and has more color play, and try to make sure I preserve that one in terms of chiseling the rock open.
In light of that question comes up once. If you have a big opal and a little opal, which one's more expensive? Well, there's a whole lot of factors. And again, we'll talk about this next week. If you got a little opal that's a 4 brightness and you got a big opal that's a 1 brightness, there's no contest. Because one of the first things that's important when you look at an opal is how bright it is. The brighter, the better. Okay. Any other questions before we move on to the part that I'm going to confuse
that's
you
all
on?
I see.
Pardon?
Go forward.
Okay. Mexico's got about 6 places where you can find fire opal all over Mexico. It's all over the place. But there are 6 states, I guess, that have a significant production, and that Hidalgo, Guerrero, I never can pronounce that one. Michoacan, Jalisco, Chihuahua, and San Luis Potosí, I guess that's pronounced. If any of you Spanish speakers are out there, I apologize. However, this area here is probably the hotspot for opal in general. Now, a little bit further down here, we're going to talk about another place that's over here, but this is where a lot of there's a lot of mines in this area, just a ton of them, and a lot of the volume of fire opal comes out of this area. Okay, now again, my Spanish, I'm not even going to try this, but the Aztec word for opal is this word up here, and it means hummingbird. So it's to the Spanish, it's a hummingbird stone. Okay, for about the last 100 years or so, Mexico was the primary source for fire opal. If you went into any store given anywhere and looked at a fire opal, it probably came from Mexico. This is starting to change a little bit, but Mexico still does produce most of the fire opal. And one of the reasons that Mexico is so popular is, for some reason, the colors are pretty vivid in Mexican opal. Now, that doesn't mean that it's all that way, but some of the brightest of the fire opal family has come out of Mexico. Again, we have a rhyolitic host rock. Those volcanoes are everywhere. Now, it doesn't always have to be a volcano. It could be like a flow. It doesn't, you know what I mean? So I want to take that out of your thinking. It's not necessarily something that's going to be exploding. Okay, now I said we're going to look at another area for the significant, and that was this Magdalena in the Jalisco area. There's a lot of mines in that area as well. Again, open pit. Someone asked earlier, how do you mine? In this country, you very rarely go underground. And this is what you get after I lost the slide here. Okay, from the opal rough that you get out of this, you can kind of see what it might look like down here. Anyway, with time and patience, this is the product that's put out. And here we have the orange and the yellow, and this was supposed to be red, but on my screen it doesn't look too red. Okay, Honduras. Honduras has the notoriety of having the oldest opal mine in the world, and I'm going to pronounce that as Tablon Opal Mine. Now, when I read that, I had to think of myself, well, what about Hungary, however you want to say that? And my assumption was they're assuming that the Aztecs and the Mayans and all those guys probably mined in this area, they were probably around way before the Slovak Republic. Again, our volcanoes are here. We have a black matrix, and this kind of more of a basalt than a rhyolite. But what happens is, instead of having big chunks of opal, it seems like that the opal flows weren't quite maybe as violent as they were in other areas. So the pockets weren't as large. So you get little specks of opal. Now the best of the Honduran opal comes from this Limpura in eastern part of the country. And I'll show you where that's at here in a few minutes. Now, for those of you who cut opal or are going to, you be careful. The basalt is very soft. And what happens is the Honduran opal is mixed with sandstone, and it's mixed into the basalt. So when you're grinding on it, the heat will make that quartz crystals expand and they pop out. So what you have to do is polish the rock the best you can. And then those of you who are cutters probably have heard of the term octagon. Anyway, so you can coat it in octagon, or you can use some of your own clear resin recipe, whichever you want to use, and you fill it in, and then you repolish it, and they come up pretty nice. This is that area I was telling you about. Where some of the better Honduran comes from. Okay, this is Honduran Rough. You can see that it's really grainy. I tried to get this close, and you can see the little specks of opal, but you see sand grains and basalt all mixed in there. And if you're lapidarius, that can be a real problem for you. But if you take the time to work with it, this is what you can come up with. All righty. These are obviously just polished, I'm going to call them, for lack of a better term, knobbies, because they haven't been fashioned into anything as far as jewelry. And just to let you know that Honduras does have a light-based opal. Very rare, but they do have it. Okay. Brazil. Again, Brazil has, if you're a gem collector at all, Brazil is in your vocabulary, particularly an area called, I'm going to mispronounce this too, Mias or Mias Grancas, this area right down in here. There's all kinds of gems down in that area. But we're going to talk about this Boyo Morto mine up here in whatever this place is. Okay. Okay. Now, again, the mining in Australia, the mining in Brazil is not tunnels. Most of the opals are found at the bottom of cliffs. They've been washed out of the strata. Again, no large equipment is used to mine these. It's all, the only thing they have is a generator for maybe a jackhammer and lights. Now, one of the nice things about one of the nice things about Brazilian opal is that the water content is very low. So Brazilian opal is harder than the average opal. So there is some value to that if you're a heavy-handed cutter. Okay. The color in Brazilian opal are very pastel. They're not bright. I mean, not that they don't have it, but the average good quality Brazilian opal is basically going to be pastel color. Oop. I forgot to show you this. This is the what I say about being pastel. So they're not real sharp. When you look at this, you don't feel like you're gonna cut your finger. You can pick this up and look at it, because it's nice and it's pleasing, soothing, so to speak. And I think that's going to be it for the day. Yes.
There's another couple of questions.
Okay.
One is, can you comment on how mining in the Americas is regulated? Are there times that people can dig?
Yes. And I hesitate to get into that because what happens is each mine has their own set of rules. Depending on, like the mines up in Washington and Oregon, their digging season is different than ours. As far as regulations, the OSHA is probably the overall guidance. They have their fingers in everything. So everything they do has to be OSHA safe. And then there's some common sense things, depending on the rock, or not the rock, but the mine or the location. So it's a tough question to answer. You'd almost have to say, okay, I'm going to go dig at Opal Butte. They've got a couple of websites, and you call that website or get on that website, and they'll give you all the information you need. Sometimes they'll tell you what tools you need to bring, if you do need any documentation, what it is, that kind of thing. Sorry, Veronica, I couldn't think of anything to ask you, but thanks for being here. Veronica is our show chairman. She's sitting here smiling and she's got a cat behind her, but I don't know if that thing's alive. If that's a live cat, that's a big cat. Has nothing to do with what we were just talking about.
Let me add a couple of thoughts about the mining procedures. First of all, the area has to be open for digging. Some areas are protected or closed because, like the Virgin Valley is a place that's available, but it's in the middle of a preserve. So a person can't just go off the road somewhere and try to find opal randomly. They have to go where someone has a claim. If there's a claim, the person that owns the claim will define how you can dig there. And they'll charge whatever they want depending on the situation. They've already got permission to dig. That's part of having a claim. Seasonally, you can usually go if it's possible. In the Virgin Valley in northern Nevada, the clay that the opal is in turns to grease if it gets wet. So if it rains, no matter what time of the year it is, you can't go because you can't stand up. You literally fall down trying to walk around out there. So those are some thoughts about regulations on mining. Another question, Pete, would be to describe fire opal versus opal with color play. Because you had an example of fire opal from Mexico.
Okay. One of my favorite topics, people I hear all the time, and even I read in advertisements from big jewelry stores. You'll hear this term fire opal. A lot of people think that any opal that has color play is a fire opal. That's not true. A fire opal is only one of three things. A clear base or a clear opal that's red, orange, or yellow. That's a fire opal. Sometimes it has play of color. I have one that if you hold it just right, you get these little streaks of purple that run across the face of the table. And then I've seen some with other colors, but purple seems to be the big one. But a fire opal is, now most of the fire opals, like I said earlier, come from Mexico. And they're either going to be a clear base orange, yellow, or red, in various intensities, of course. But that's the difference. A regular opal has got multiple colors. It has colors, period, where a fire opal generally does not. And they usually have a translucent to translucent to opaque base. The color's pretty solid.
Okay, two more things. One, Veronica wants us to know that's not a real cat, that's a photo, a screen. Secondly, mention how people can join the Opal Society. And I think that's it for our day.
Oh, you know what, Veronica? I'm sitting there watching that kid. I'm saying, that kid's probably hungry and he hasn't moved. What a cruel person. But no, not really. Okay, how do you join the Opal Society? Well, there's a number of ways. The first way is to go to the American Opal Society webpage. Is that right, web page?
Yeah.
Okay, on there is an application form. Now, what I don't know, and I guess I should know, I don't know if you can transmit it or do they just copy it and mail it.
It can be filled out and they could pay on PayPal. We currently have a problem with the website. We're trying to figure out what's wrong. That's what's supposed to be true. Or it could be mailed in.
All right, secondly, you might want to call Russ and bug him. Thirdly, might want to call Veronica and bug her. And fourthly, when the COVID thing goes away, if you're familiar with Anaheim, they have the Anaheim, I forgot what it's called.
Community Center.
Oh yeah, the Anaheim Community Center. We meet there the third Wednesday of every month from about 7 to 9. So sometimes we just have a BS session. Sometimes somebody will bring in something that's instructive. Sometimes somebody will bring something in, show and tell. If what we would like to see is maybe some of y'all show up with these questions, and that would give us a time to get with you face to face and explain some of the detail that we can't explain on using this type of venue. But I mean, I love to talk, as you can probably tell. I don't make sense all the time, but shoot, by the time the end of the conversation, you'll have learned something. That's about it, I think.
What about next week?
Oh, next Sunday at 1 o'clock, be here, be square, whatever that is about how to when you buy opal. There's two ways to buy opal nowadays. You buy it in a brick and mortar store, or you go to the internet, and you have to approach it two different ways. And what we're going to talk about next week is how to identify a real opal from a doublet, from a triplet. Well, those are real opals in the true sense of the word, because there's a slice of opal in there. But I should say solid opal versus a doublet versus a triplet, and give you an idea of how to determine their value. There's a evaluation process that you can use. That's a real general process. One of the workshops that we have is an opal evaluation. I have an opal evaluation kit that I got from Paul Downing, and I have the master gems, and I have all the paperwork. So if you bring me an opal, I won't do it, but we together will go through and determine what your opal is as far as value. That takes a lot of time, but there are some real general things you can look at when you go into an opal store and pick up an opal. The first thing I do is I look at the back of the stone. I look at the ring, turn the ring over, and see if you can see that stone coming out the back. If you can't, then you got a problem, because it might be a doublet or a triplet. Because really good doublets and triplets, if they're set in a bezel set, it's hard to tell them apart from a real opal. And you need to know things, and I'll kind of show you a little bit how to do that. and what kind of question to ask so that when the guy answers you, you got him. He's either legal or he's not, that kind of thing. But does that answer the question? Whoever asked that.
Yeah. That's
Okay.
good.
Anything else?
I
Okay.
don't think so. Carol?
Oh, Carol, I'm sure
Wow.
this one probably wasn't as exciting as the first one.
Well, you know, I was making notes as we
Yeah, I know. I
went
see you.
along.
You need to get a voice recorder because I can see you make me nervous because I see you do it trying to catch. You remind me of some of my students. I get students that sit right in the front, right, and they'll write down everything that I say. I look at them and say, "No, that's not how you take notes."
I was
Anyway.
making notes because it's so much fascinating information. And I want to just mention to everyone that in the chat is the link for next week's program. So you can just click on that and you'll get your individual registration for next week. I want to also remind everyone that this program is available on the MUZEO website, and it was recorded, and then we'll be able to download it onto social media later. But I hope that some of you recorded it as well. We invite you to let us know your thoughts on this program and others that we give through the MUZEO. We want to make sure that we're constantly providing relevant programs for your edification and for your just general information about what's happening in the city and certainly what's happening in the arts. And I'd like to offer a special thank you to someone you never see, but it all happens because of her, and that's Berkenda. She's behind the scenes. And of course, a special thank you to Russ for his injection of information and fielding the questions, and without a doubt to you, Pete, for enlightening us about how precious opals are. And
Oh, yes.
next week we have the last of the series on October the 11th, and we'll see you at 1 o'clock. Next week, as you've heard, Pete will be sharing with us how to best purchase opals and take care of these beautiful gems. So until next week at 1 o'clock, it is my pleasure on behalf of the MUZEO to thank you for joining us this Sunday afternoon when you could be doing so many other things, but we appreciate you being with us, and we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
All right, back to the football game, guys.